I'm gonna be live streaming a lecture, so just so you know, so everything you said. I mean, it's fine if you're, but normally I go to. Oh, okay. I just want you. Okay, cool. I just want to let you know because everything I say gets live streamed. So that's why I usually go to the library, but I didn't want to go today because of COVID. So now I'm here. And now everyone just heard that. You know, because everything I say. Maybe I'll share a picture of my dog. Oh. Hi, Jen.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Great.
Okay, wait, let me hide selfie. I hide myself.
Everything okay?
Yep, everything should be working.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday of week 3. Oh, it's not Wednesday, it's Monday. Monday of week 3. Please put your extra electronics away. I hope that you've greeted your lab mates. Get out your notes pages and take a deep breath. We're going to work our way into what's next in BiSci. So I have turned off one just announcement is that the chat has been turned off in the YouTube account because I can't see those. And so I want to make sure that your comments are getting seen either by your TAs, and then if there's anything there that is important for me to see as we progress, then they can pass that on to me. So I just want to make sure that your comments are being seen and that they're being attended to. So please, as we go, if you have any questions about what's going on or if you have any comments, please just go ahead and put those in your Zoom chat with your TAs and your lab mates so that we can attend to those. And I appreciate your comments and such, your questions, because that's what this is all about. So thank you for all of that. So take a moment, just as we often do, to take some deep breaths and come into real presence. It feels strange to be doing this on a day that some people are on holiday, and yet we are all here together. And so I appreciate you being here under these weird circumstances. But take some breaths, take some deep breaths, and as you do so, really try to slow yourself down, and then become aware of your body, how you're sitting, how you're using your body right now. As you become aware of your posture, of your presence, recognize that every molecule that makes up your body existed before it was part of you. Every water molecule in your blood came into your body in the form of something that you ate or drank. Take a minute and picture yourself sipping on a cup of tea. And while it's in your cup, it's not obviously part of your body. But then you drink. And some of that water becomes part of your body, part of your blood. But then even before your cup of tea was your cup of tea, it existed a long time in other places. That water has been rain and rivers and oceans and clouds as it moved through the water cycle. And now it's become part of you from this period of time, and just for a little period of time. So as you take these deep breaths this day, please remember and recognize that every molecule in your body has been soil or stone or sea. Your body is made entirely of elements that have been other things and will be other things again. Realizing that you are not separate or cut off from the rest of nature. We are all connected. So as a quick review from last week, what's an example of a story that you told yourself today? A story that you told yourself today. It could be something like, when I went to play basketball, John made me so angry that I slammed the ball. Well, your story in that case is that John made you angry. And actually, going back to the conversation about choice, is that you chose to be angry. You chose to be upset about that. Or maybe your story was, oh, I didn't have time for breakfast. But well, why? We've all had the same number of hours already today. And so there was time for breakfast, but you chose not to have it. So your story is that you didn't have time. Or maybe your story is, I have to do my homework. I can't hang out right now because I have to do my homework. But in reality, you don't really have to do your homework. You might choose to do your homework. So keeping that in mind in this word story, a story is a way of seeing. It's a belief. It could become your truth. So there's an evolution to this idea of how we see the world and how we choose to react to it. The choices, the beliefs that we choose. And that's what we're going to be diving into today, is the idea that we get to choose our story. And particularly today, we're going to be talking about origin stories. So keeping that in mind, I'd like you to write down this quote, that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. Take a moment and write it down. Some of you may know Viktor Frankl. He's a celebrated Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He was born in 1905 and lived until 1997. And he remains best known for his work, his writing, called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a meditation on the gruesome experience of being in Auschwitz and what that experience taught him about the primary purpose of life, the quest for meaning for those who survived. It's all about choice in your situation. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, and that is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So going back to that quote that we ended with last Wednesday of, we're choosing our own destiny, choosing our own story. And so today, as we think about origins, I want to start with this story. It's the story of Sky Woman falling onto Turtle Island. In the beginning, there was Sky World, and a woman that inhabited that world slipped and fell into, or rather through, a hole. She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below, but in that emptiness there were many eyes gazing up at that sudden shaft of light. There they saw a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman with her arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled toward them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman from above the water much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather: the loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water, and they agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help: otter, beaver, sturgeon. But the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned gasping for air with their heads ringing, and some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go, while others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative, and eventually a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks from the dab of mud on the turtle's back until the whole world was made. Not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts, coupled with her deep gratitude. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, remember that Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clenched in her hand. As she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruit and seed, and all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals too had plenty to eat, many of them came to live with her on Turtle Island. So this is an origin story, a story of how our Earth came to be, of how our world, the world, came to be. It's from the oral tradition from the Potawatomi Nation and others throughout the Great Lakes region, Native American tribes, as told by one of those Native American citizens and botanist. Her name is Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she wrote this lovely book, Braiding Sweetgrass. She is trained, she's a botanist, a trained botanist, trained to ask questions of nature with the tools of science. And she's a member of the Potawatomi Nation that embraces the notion that plants and animals are teachers. I like to imagine what it would be like if this was my story. What if this was the story that you had? Can you imagine having this story as a child when you were being told those stories of how we came to be? There was no specific creator in this story. There were just animals, beings working together to make wonder and beauty. Children that hear Sky Woman Falling story from birth know in their bones that they have a responsibility that flows between humans and Earth. I can't imagine, or I can't help but wonder how different our society might be today if we were all raised with an origin story that hinges on gratitude and interdependence. What if we all knew in our bones the sacred responsibility that flowed between humans and Earth? So I'd like to take 3 minutes now for you to break out into your groups and think about origin story. We're going to continue this conversation after your 3 minutes. Share in that conversation. So the Native Americans have their stories. And there are other stories as well. Other earlier people had a relationship of wonder with the universe, especially those phenomena that they could not rationally understand. So to solve those mysteries, they created vast pantheon of gods and goddesses to explain everything or anything that was beyond their understanding. Thunder, tides, earthquakes, volcanoes, infertilities, plagues, and even love. For early Greeks, the ebb and flow of the ocean was attributed to the shifting moods of Poseidon. The seasonal change to winter was caused by the planet's sadness at Persephone's annual abduction into the underworld. For the Romans, volcanoes were believed to be the home of Vulcan, blacksmith to the gods. He worked in a giant forge beneath the mountain, causing flames to spew out of the chimney. The ancients invented countless gods to explain not only the mysteries of the planet, but also the mysteries of their own beings. In Greece, love was the result of being targeted by Eros, and epidemics were explained as a punishment sent by Apollo. When these ancient people experienced gaps in their understanding of the world around them, they filled those gaps with stories that they could understand and to hold on to. Countless stories filled countless gaps, and yet over the centuries, scientific knowledge increased. As the gaps in human understanding of the natural world gradually disappeared, so did the stories. They began to shrink. But make no mistake about it, the history did not go gently away. It's a messy process for culture to abandon its stories. Beliefs are etched deeply on us at a young age by those we love and those we trust most, our parents, our teachers, our religious leaders. And therefore, any shifts in story, shift in belief, require work and reflection and often discomfort. And so, here's another story, the Genesis creation story of both Christianity and Judaism. This is the story created by humans that is said to be divinely inspired. Stories give meaning. So if this is your story, or if you have a different story, consider for a moment how that story, how your story of how the earth, the world came to be, consider how that has shaped you and your beliefs and your views and your actions too. So take just a moment of quiet reflection on your own. Make a note or two on your notes page for today. When I looked up creation myth, because myth is another word for story, when I looked up creation myth on Wikipedia, there were many, many of them listed there. Not to mention all of those that aren't listed in Wikipedia. I found it to be very interesting to consider the origins, the stories, how they got started, and how they've shaped people's lives. And so, with 530 people listening to this in this class, the number of stories that we represent is immense. It's beautiful, and it creates the community of who we are. Remember that belief is always a choice. This is Joan Chittister. She's a Benedictine nun. And the story goes that as she was joining the faith at age 16, she was listening to a speaker, and she asked that speaker, "How do you know that God exists?" She was wondering if she was making the right choice to follow this faith. How do you prove that God exists? And the answer came back that you can't prove that it is true, but you can't prove that it's not true. Belief is always a choice. So there's one more story, the science story of how we came to be here. How did our universe come to be? And it's a huge question. Many people believe that it is the Big Bang. And the first order of that mystery is that first there was light. That light and that expanding universe as we know it now, 14 billion years ago. How did the light start? Nobody knows. Scientists are still working on this story, trying to get to the beginning of this story. And so, how did science come to believe that this was the case? Through lots of research, figuring out what minerals are where on our planet, and then back calculating. The background radiate from the original blast 14 billion years ago is still detectable. But first there was light. And sometimes religion is at odds with science. But what if 14 billion years ago God somehow decided to show him or herself? And that may be your belief, or it may not. Your belief is your choice. What I do know is that bonding is at the heart of our cosmos. Gravity and energy are the organizing forces, and they engender relationships, they engender connections. The very first elementary particles, way back then, 14 billion years ago, the quarks and the leptons bonded in stable relationships, and then gravity keeps them in relationships, connected. It could have all been different. It could have not been like this at all. We could have had disconnected particles which wouldn't have led to where we are now, except that there's this allurement between opposites that gave birth to atoms. There is direct connection. So the complexity of what we experience now is because of those bonds, those relationships. The universe started out as all this undifferentiated energy, and it's been expanding and becoming more complex. Bonding is at the heart of the cosmos. The Big Bang is in you. It's in you. You might ask, how can this possibly be? Well, the fact is that all of the hydrogen on our planet, in our atmosphere, all of the hydrogen that currently exists, it formed 14 billion years ago, and that was the only time that hydrogen came into existence, 14 billion years ago. It was only created at that primordial flaring forth of the galaxy. And it's hydrogen that gave rise to the first stars and the galaxies. And so we talked last week about what is water? All of that hydrogen in a glass of water is 14 billion years old. And that hydrogen is the most abundant atom in your body and my body. So how old are you? You might be 18, you might be 20, you might be 30, you might be 40 or 80, but the stuff inside of you is 14 billion years old. We are the universe. One of the most violent events ever to regularly occur in the universe is the death of stars, supernova, and that's what birthed our Earth. A star is a huge ball of hydrogen gas compressed by gravity, fusing into helium, which releases an enormous amount of heat and light. It's a fusion reactor. And so our sun, which is 1,000,000 times larger than Earth and 93 million miles from here, is what's happening. It's a star made of hydrogen and helium. And so when all of that hydrogen fuel is used up, there's a great cosmic alchemy that begins. Stars have finite life and then they die. And then the elements, heavy elements, are released as gas clouds. They condense in gravity to form solar systems. So without these explosions, the basic stuff of planets and the life that exists on them, on this planet, would not exist. I'd like you to check out this Neil deGrasse Tyson video.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe? The most astounding fact is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars.
This is your biggest story. You are stardust. The universe is not a thing out there. I am the universe in the form of Jen. I am a compilation of universe bits, all put together in a really remarkable way. So I want you to take time in your groups. I'd like you to take 5 minutes in your group to talk about the implications. What does this mean? How does this feel when you think about your connections? And then we'll come back together. If you have things that you'd like me to see, please let your TAs know and they'll put it in the chat for me. And I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts. I'm appreciating very much the comments that I'm hearing from all of you. Here's a snippet of what's happening in some of the groups. Sometimes we feel so insignificant and isolated, but at our core, we all share something. Everything is connected on the deepest possible level. The thought of having a little universe in me makes me feel important. We are all connected somehow. We are a part of something so big that we can't, in our lifetimes, get to see it all. Someone said, I feel full of purpose. And like the animals in the story, we are connected by stars' dust. Maybe we aren't alone in the universe. Being the universe is a lot to live up to. And life might be the cosmos taking a step back and saying, wow, I am awesome. However you choose to believe we got here, we are all the same in the end. So remembering to treat everyone with kindness and equally, as well as taking care of the earth for all of us to enjoy. Somebody said they don't have to overthink the little things because there are such big things to be understood. We're made up of the same stuff that makes up the rest of the earth and the environment. I think it's cool to think about the series of events that happened through history to get us to this moment. If we're all part of the universe, then we're all connected. So just flash back for a moment to our very first class. Is it us or is it them? And what do those words really mean? What do those two words encompass? Is it us or is it them? Yeah. So sometimes people struggle with this class because it feels as though I'm pushing my beliefs on you, which is never the case. My idea is that I want to open your ideas to have new space. And so another thing that people struggle with is the idea that sometimes they have a belief that they really hold strongly to, and that maybe this class challenges that. But thinking back to what we've talked about concerning dualism, maybe you want to reflect on the idea that maybe you can hold two or more things at once. Do you want to hold two or more things at once? Not either or, but both and? So that's a question to consider. It is absolutely, somebody just wrote in the chat that it's hard to know what to believe. And that is absolutely true. It takes time and it takes energy and it takes feeling and it takes emotion and it takes living your way into the answers for these things. So the big picture of this course is this. Would you please write this down? What you choose to believe about your origin profoundly affects your understanding of who you are and why you are here. What you choose to believe about your origin profoundly affects your understanding of who you are and why you are here. So when reading Sky Woman Falling, go back to my comment that I can't help but wonder how different our society would be today if we were all raised with an origin story that hinges on gratitude and interdependence. What if we believed that that's who we were supposed to be, is interdependent, not independent? What if we all knew in our bones that there was a sacred responsibility that flows between humans and Earth? The painting that you see in this slide is an ecological identity project from a couple years back from a student who painted this, thinking about her connections, her origins of the universe, from the universe. And so you'll have a chance to express your connections in your ecological identity project at the end of the semester. Brian Swim says, take hydrogen gas, leave it alone for 14 billion years, and it becomes rose bushes, giraffes, and Mozart symphonies. It's that sense of being awestruck. I'd like to share this YouTube video with you now.
Eminent psychologist Nicholas Humphrey has written of the biological advantage of being awestruck. How fortuitous, he says, for a species to find its ability to contemplate, to marvel at its own existence, has been evolutionarily advantageous. In other words, it has been biologically selected for because it informs our life with a sense of cosmic significance that makes us work harder to persist and to survive. In other words, awe has helped us survive. You know, a recent study out of Stanford on the subject of awe kind of validates this idea. They have found that regular incidences of awe leave residual benefits upon the individual that persist, such as increased feelings of empathy and compassion towards others, increased feelings of altruism, and increased feelings of general well-being. In this study, they defined awe as an experience of such perceptual expansion, such perceptual vastness, that you literally have to reconfigure, upgrade your mental schemata just to accommodate, just to take in the scale of the experience. This is amazing. We've all felt this before. The first time we stared upon the Grand Canyon or succumbed to the immersive power of an IMAX film. But perhaps the most exquisite account of the experience of awe was articulated by the brilliant Ross Anderson when writing about the Hubble Space Telescope. Pay attention. He says that the Hubble has given us nothing less than an ontological awakening, a forceful reckoning is, allowing us to contemplate space and time on a scale just shy of infinite. Why? He says gazing upon the famous deep field photograph literally allows us to mainline the whole of time through the optic nerve. To fit something so impossibly large to something so impossibly small. It's incredible. He says through the sheer aesthetic force of its discoveries, the Hubble distills the impossibly complex abstractions of astrophysics to these singular expressions of color and light, vindicating Keats' famous couplet, beauty is truth, truth, beauty.
Being awestruck. There's something about this time that we're in right now, in this COVID-19 surprise kind of time, that I feel as though has a particular amount of power. There are stories that are shifting, my speculation, is that there are stories that are shifting right now. I would like you to take 3 minutes in your group to talk about that. What do you feel is shifting? Do you feel something shifting like I do? If you don't, it's okay. Say that too. But what stories are shifting right now? So it's time for another pack back question for this week. And I want you to think about that video that we just watched, the idea of these shifting stories, whatever it might be to bring about the answer to this question for you. But thinking about the definition of awe being an overwhelming feeling of reverence, admiration, or fear produced by that which is grand, sublime, or extremely powerful. The sense of awe. And so your question for this week is, when do you feel awe? When do you feel awe? I want to thank you for your time, for your interaction, for your willingness to be part of this, and I hope that you have a beautiful day.